Japan has the longest life expectancy on Earth. Its cities are clean, its trains are punctual, and its crime rate is among the lowest of any country in the world. It is, by almost every measure, one of the safest and most orderly places a person can grow old. And in 2024, according to Japan's own national police agency, more than 76,000 people died alone in their homes and were not found right away. That is over 200 people every single day, dying in a country where help is never more than a phone call away and no one noticing for hours, for days, and in thousands of cases for more than a month. The Japanese have a word for it, Kodokushi. It means the lonely death, and more precisely, dying alone and going undiscovered long enough that the body begins to change. This is not a horror story. There are no ghosts in it. What makes Kodokushi frightening is that it is ordinary, it is documented, it is rising every year, and the conditions that cause it are not unique to Japan. They are simply furthest along there. By the end of this, you will understand a second word, one that Japanese television put on the map in 2010, and it explains how the safest country on Earth became a place where you can die in your own apartment and have the next person through the door be a stranger in a protective suit. But to understand how that happens, you have to go back to a time when Japan was building the exact opposite. In the decades after the Second World War, Japan rebuilt itself faster than almost any country in history. Tens of millions of people left the countryside, where families had lived 3 generations to a house, and moved into the cities for work. To house them, the government built enormous apartment complexes called danchi, which were grids of identical concrete blocks, each one filled with hundreds of small, modern, identical units. In the 1950s and the 1960s, a danchi apartment was a dream. It meant a steady job, a private bathroom, a refrigerator, a television, a future. Young couples moved in, raised 1 or 2 children, and believed their parents and their children would carry them into old age the way Japanese families always had. For a while, it worked. Life expectancy climbed past 80 and kept climbing until Japan held the longest lifespans in the world. But the same modern life that let people live longer also quietly cut the threads that used to hold them in place. The children who grew up in the danchi did not move their aging parents in with them. They moved to other cities for other jobs, into apartments of their own. The multi-generational household, once the backbone of Japanese old age, began to disappear. In the span of 2 generations, a culture that had measured a family's strength by how many people lived under one roof came to measure success the opposite way, by how few people you needed around you to get through a day. By the 2020s, the most common household in the entire country was simply one person. Walk through a danchi after dark now and you can read it in the windows. Whole floors of single lamps, 1 to a unit, each one behind a door that no one else holds a key to. The fastest growing group inside that number was the elderly. Japan had built tens of millions of small private boxes for people to succeed in. It had not noticed that the same boxes were perfect for disappearing in. Today, more than 1 in 4 Japanese people is over the age of 65, and many of them are in those same apartments, decades later, alone. The structure that promised a modern life had quietly become the structure of an isolated one. And then the bonds themselves began to go. In 2010, the public broadcaster NHK aired a documentary that finally gave the whole thing a name. They called it Muen Shakai, which translates as the relationless society, a society where the connections between family, neighbors, and community have worn so thin that a person can slip through all of them at once and vanish without anyone noticing. The program had been prompted by a single figure that around 32,000 people had died lonely deaths in the previous year. The phrase Muen Shakai struck a nerve so deep that it entered everyday language almost overnight, because millions of people recognized their own lives in it. Three forces had pulled the threads apart. The first was age. A generation that had expected its children to care for it simply outlived that expectation by 20 or 30 years, until the child who was supposed to do the caring was a 60-something in another city with knees nearly as bad as their own. The second was work, or the loss of it. The lifetime employment that defined post-war Japan eroded after the asset bubble, the Baburu Keiki, collapsed in 1991, and a generation of men in particular had built their whole identity around a single company. When the work ended, or a marriage ended, the company friendships ended with it, and there was nothing underneath. A man who had eaten lunch beside the same colleagues for 40 years could retire on a Friday, and by the next Friday have no one left who was obliged to call. The third force has a number for a name. The 80-50 problem. It describes parents in their 80s still supporting an adult child in their 50s who withdrew from society and never came back. The hikikomori we covered in another video, the roughly 600,000 middle-aged recluses the government counted. About 1 in 3 of them financially dependent on a parent who will not live forever. When that parent dies, the child sometimes says nothing because saying it out loud means facing the world they spent decades hiding from. The body in the next room is not always found by a worried neighbor. Sometimes it is found because the pension payment stopped, or because the rent did. And sometimes the pension is exactly why it stays hidden. In 2010, the same year NHK named the phenomenon, police in Tokyo went to honor the city's oldest man, a supposed 111-year-old named Sogen Kato. They found his mummified body in a back room of the family home, where he had been dead for around 30 years. His relatives had hidden it and quietly collected roughly 9 million yen in his pension. His was not a freak case. When the government audited its own records, it could not confirm that 234,000 registered centenarians were actually alive, and more than 77,000 of them would have been over 120 years old. A country famous for honoring its elders had, on paper, lost track of 250,000 of its oldest people. Some were hidden for the money. Many were simply never reported, gone so long ago that no one was left who would notice. Muen Shakai is not a metaphor. It is a measurable thinning of every connection that used to guarantee someone would knock on your door. And when no one knocks, the discovery gets left to other things. The mail piling up in the box, the smell, the summer heat. When a lonely death goes undiscovered, the cleanup does not fall to the family, who are often distant, gone, or never told. It falls to a profession that barely existed a generation ago and now operates in every Japanese city. It is called tokushu seiso, meaning special cleaning, and the people who do it arrive after the body has been removed, into the room exactly as the person left it. They wear full protective suits and respirators. They bring industrial ozone machines to pull the smell out of the air, because the smell is the part that does not leave on its own. It is usually the smell, drifting into a hallway or the apartment next door, that told anyone a person was there at all. What these workers describe is rarely dramatic. It is the opposite. It is the unbearable ordinariness of the rooms. A television still on, talking to no one. A calendar stopped on the last day someone turned a page. A single plate in the sink. A heater or a fan still running, depending on the season that did the discovering. Convenience store receipts for one. Unopened New Year's cards. Medicine sorted carefully into the days of a week that ran out. In a country this orderly, the rooms are often tidy, which is somehow worse because tidiness means someone who was still trying, still keeping up appearances for a world that had quietly stopped checking in. At some of these companies, 1 in every 5 jobs is now a lonely death, and they are booked weeks in advance. The police numbers put a clock on the rest. In 2024, about 40% of people found dead at home were discovered within a day. But more than 4,500 were not found for over a month, and some were not found for more than a year. The city that recorded the most solitary deaths of anywhere in the country was Tokyo, almost 8,000 in a single year, which is the quiet paradox of Muen Shakai. It is worst exactly where people are packed most tightly together. Proximity is not connection. You can be one thin concrete wall away from 400 neighbors and still die in a room that no one opens for a season. The workers will tell you the hardest cases are not the oldest people. They are the ones where the apartment is full of small signs that the person had been reaching quietly for a connection that never arrived. That is what Muen Shakai actually looks like when you are standing inside it. Not a statistic, a room that waited. There is a woman named Miyu Kojima who worked as one of these cleaners, and what she started doing with the rooms is the part almost no one outside Japan knows. After cleaning an apartment, Kojima began building it again in miniature. Tiny, exact dioramas of the rooms where lonely deaths had happened, recreated from the photographs she took on the job, each one taking her about a month to make. The dishes left in the sink, the bottles beside the futon, even the mark that tells you where the person was finally found, rendered so small and so carefully that you are able to look at it at all. She does not build them to shock anyone. She builds them because her own father died a lonely death, estranged from her, and she only reconciled with him at the very end, sitting beside him while he was already slipping away. The dioramas are partly a warning to strangers and partly a letter to him. She has shown them in exhibitions across Japan, and people stand in front of these dollhouse-sized rooms and go completely silent. Because at that scale, you cannot look away the way you can from a number like 76,000. You can only look at the one. One television, still on. One calendar. One life that ended in a room where the next person through the door was paid to be there. The point of the rooms, she has explained, is not really the death at all. It is the days before it. The long run of unremarkable evenings in which a single phone call, a single visit, a single person still in the habit of checking in might have changed where the story ended. Kojima's entire project rests on a single idea that the statistics can never carry on their own. That every one of these deaths was a person who, somewhere along the way, simply stopped being asked how they were doing. At the start, I said Japan is the safest, most orderly country on Earth, and that is still true. That is the part people get wrong about Kodokushi. They hear about it and assume it must be a story about a broken place, a warning about somewhere far away that does things differently. It is the reverse. The lonely death is not what happens when a society fails. It is what can happen when a society succeeds, when it makes everyone safe and independent and self-sufficient and long-lived, and forgets to ask what holds a person in place once they no longer need anybody else just to survive. Muen Shakai, the relationless society, was never really a description of Japan. It was a description of where the modern world is heading, and Japan simply arrived first. Single-person households are now the most common kind across much of Europe and North America too. The same threads are thinning in the same way, only a few decades behind. So the number to sit with is not 76,000. It is one. One apartment, the lights still on, a television murmuring, a week of medicine that ran out on a Tuesday, and a calendar that no one will ever turn again. Somewhere in a city right now, that room already exists and the person inside it is still alive, still tidy, still keeping up appearances. The only thing that decides whether they become a statistic is whether anyone is still close enough to notice when the page stops turning. When was the last time you checked on the person in your life who lives alone? You can probably still picture them. The real question is whether they can still picture you. The worst place on this list. Number 4, Mount Unzen. 3 years before Ontaki, on the 3rd of June 1991, another Japanese mountain was being watched far more closely. Mount Unzen, in the south, had woken up, and a new dome of lava was rising at its peak. This time people knew. Scientists had come from around the world to study it. Among them were a French couple, Katia and Maurice Kraft, the most famous volcano photographers alive, and an American scientist named Harry Glicken. They gathered at a point they had judged to be safe, along with journalists, the taxi drivers who had driven everyone up, and firefighters keeping watch. They were wrong about safe. A pyroclastic flow, a fast avalanche of superheated gas and rock, came down the valley faster than anything could outrun and reached exactly where they stood. 43 people died there, the Crafts and Glicken among them, 3 of the most knowledgeable people on the planet about this precise kind of death. If you have seen the documentary Fire of Love, you already know Katia and Maurice Kraft. The whole film is built from the footage they shot themselves, chasing eruptions across the world for 20 years, and it ends in this valley, on this day. At Ontake, the danger came with no warning. At Unzen, the warning was everywhere. The experts were watching, and it killed them anyway. Down in the valley, the houses the flows buried have been left exactly as they were found, half swallowed in hardened mud, preserved on purpose so that nobody later gets to decide it did not happen. Number 3. Kamikuishiki. Near the foot of Mount Fuji, there used to be a village called Kamikuishiki, and inside it a cluster of plain industrial buildings the people who built them called satian. From the outside, they looked like warehouses. Inside one of them, numbered Satian 7, a doomsday cult called Shinrikyo was manufacturing sarin, a nerve agent invented for the battlefield. On the morning of March 20th, 1995, 5 of its members boarded the Tokyo subway at rush hour and punctured bags of that sarin with the sharpened tips of umbrellas. 13 people died that day. A 14th died years later from her injuries. More than 6,000 were hurt. It is the worst act of terrorism in modern Japanese history, and it was assembled in those quiet buildings beneath the most famous mountain in the country. The novelist Haruki Murakami spent a year interviewing the survivors for a book called Underground because he felt his country was trying to forget it too quickly. Here is the part that belongs on this list. The cult is gone, its leaders executed, the Satian buildings torn down. And the village of Kamikuishiki itself was dissolved in 2006, wiped off the map, its name removed and folded into its neighbors, as if the country were trying to forget the address had ever existed. There is a park near the site now. People have picnics on the ground where the gas was made. Number 2, Yubari, 116,908. That was the population of Yubari, a coal city in the mountains of Hokkaido in 1960. Today it is under 7,000. Yubari did everything the country ever asked of it. It dug the coal that powered Japan, and when Japan switched from coal to oil and the mines began to close, it did not give up. It bet on tourism instead. It built a coal museum, theme parks, a film festival, and it borrowed and borrowed again against that same bubble economy we have been tracking through this entire list. Then the bubble burst and the visitors it had built everything for never came. In 2006, Yubari became the first city in Japan to officially go bankrupt, buried under a debt of around 35 billion yen, roughly $300 million. This is the same wave that drowned the Ghost Woman Park and the Island Paradise Hotel, except here it did not take a building. It took a city. And here's the detail that is almost too perfect. For years, Yubari hosted a famous international film festival devoted to horror and fantasy. When the money ran out in 2006, the horror festival was one of the first things the city could no longer afford. The town that threw a yearly party for scary movies had quietly become one. And long before any of that, in 1981, a gas explosion in one of those Yubari mines killed 93 men underground in a single night. The coal closed the mine. The mine emptied the town. The town is still standing. Most of the people are not. Number 1, the Fukushima exclusion zone. On March 11, 2011, the largest earthquake in Japan's recorded history pushed a wall of water onto the northeast coast, and that wave overwhelmed the seawall at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, and 3 of its reactors melted down. In the days that followed, the towns around it, Futaba, Namie, Tomioka, were ordered to leave. Tens of thousands walked out of their homes expecting to be back within days. Some never came back at all. For years, these towns sat behind locked gates, sealed inside what the government calls the difficult-to-return zone, while crews in white suits scraped the soil into black bags and stacked them in the fields by the million. Futaba, the closest town, did not allow a single resident to move home until 2022, 11 years later. Of the roughly 7,000 people who once lived there, a few hundred at most have returned. Now think back to what I told you to hold. Ontake gave no warning. Unzen gave every warning and killed the experts who listened. Fukushima is the third kind and the worst because the warning had been written down for years. Engineers had said the seawall was too low. The report sat in a drawer until the sea made the decision for everyone. You can take a guided tour through parts of it now. You will not be allowed to wander, and you will not be allowed to stay. The towns behind those gates are not haunted. That is the hard part. Nothing is in there. The lights do not turn themselves on. There is only the wind, the fields of black bags, and a sign on the road that tells you why you cannot go home. Remember the word the priests used in Okinawa? Tatari, a reckoning for disturbing something you were warned to leave alone. They meant the dead, but take the ghosts out of it, and the word still fits every place you just saw. Nobody here was cursed. They were warned. A seawall someone was told to build higher. An island whose air someone was told not to trust. A debt someone was told not to sign. The warning was always there, on paper, in a drawer, and the reckoning came anyway. So when you stand at the gate of one of these places and feel something climb your spine, ask what is actually scaring you. The dead who never said a word, or the living who read the report and signed it and drove home. One of those you leave behind when the bus pulls away. The other one climbs into the car with you. So ask yourself on the drive back, which one were you ever really afraid of? If you made it all the way to the bottom of this list, you clearly do not scare easily. So do one small thing for me. Subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it tells us to keep digging these up. Part 1 is still sitting in the corner of your screen if you skipped it. And tell me in the comments, of these 13, which one would you actually set foot in after dark? And which one could you not be paid enough to enter? There is a lot more of this country we have not shown you yet.
The ones the mountains simply decided to keep. Maybe that is the real reason locals refuse these roads after sundown. Not because they are sure that ghosts are real, but because they remember the people, every one of them, and they would honestly rather not meet them on a dark and narrow road. If you made it all the way to the end, do me a favor and tap the like button. It takes about 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps more people find these stories. And tell me down in the comments, which of these 15 you would actually be brave enough to drive through at midnight, and which haunted tunnel near you I left off the list. There is far more of this hidden Japan where that came from, and we are only just getting started.